with Inspire Me 360, and I wanted to make a video about the nature of addictions and what propels humans to get into addictive behaviors. And predominantly my passion, or one of the things that I really wanted to delve into at some point in my life, was addictions to drugs and alcohol. One of the reasons I wanted to delve into this topic is because growing up, I have had a lot of really close family and spouses have very acute issues with drugs and alcohol. And so it's, really marked my life in big ways, and it's given me a bird's eye view to kind of understand the mechanism of why I believe a lot of individuals fall into the trap of addictions. So kind of my top reasons that I feel that a lot of individuals actually go down the path of drugs and alcohol. Specifically, my experience with my family members has been that it can be almost like a dual diagnosis issue. So there might be a little bit of mental instability to begin with, and then you layer that with social anxiety, trouble interacting with others, and if proper social skills and a proper sort of infrastructure in terms of interpersonal relationships isn't present in the developmental stages, especially for children, or in terms of family situations, this can be something that's kind of a precursor to an environment for addictive behaviors to develop. The other thing that I've noticed, because again, I've had individuals in my life that came from great family backgrounds as well, that still fell into the trap of addiction. And what I found with those individuals was that it tended to be, again, somewhat to do with social anxiety, things like boredom, so not really having a clear purpose of what to do with their time, and a lower self-esteem, so not having, a really well-cultivated principle of self-love and self-protection, within their own consciousness construct, okay? So let's look at, the first element. So when we're dealing with addiction and individuals that have had, maybe not a lot of infrastructure in terms of interpersonal relationships, if they're coming from maybe a family environment that was fairly chaotic, and then you layer in some mental instability. So they have, a propensity towards anxiety or anxiety disorder or depression, and they don't know how to cope with the overwhelming feelings. So I'm going to deal first with anxiety disorder, because again, this is something I've suffered with my entire life, this feeling of kind of impending doom and just being very, very overly anxious and having quite a difficult time in really busy social settings. I find myself becoming very anxious, and I feel overwhelmed when there's a lot of energies and a lot of different conversations. And it's something, I don't know if, previously my ancestors were very quiet farm folk or something like that, that didn't live in a city and didn't have a lot of the hustle and bustle, whatever it may be. But for me, I find like going to a busy restaurant super overwhelming. Like there's voices in every direction. I have difficulty following multiple conversations, and this gives me, a lot of anxiety. And really, even to this day, the only way that I can deal with being in those environments for a long period of time is to have like a glass of wine. Now, I have really kind of stabilized my own boundaries in terms of that. So, I'll have one, maybe two glasses of wine, and it doesn't become, a negative thing. And because I'm not forcing myself to be in those uncomfortable situations, periodically, again, there's no addictive personality that has precipitated from my need to kind of buffer a lot of energies around me. But I know that especially if you're in a job environment that dictate social settings or gatherings or large meetings or conferences all the time. And if you do have that, predisposition to anxiety, this is where, again, drinking can be a really difficult or slippery slope, because I really have to be honest, I couldn't do it. I would not be able to sustain day in and day out being in a very kind of restaurant like an atmosphere where there's a lot of people. I'm very much an introvert, so I just wouldn't be able to handle that. And the only way that, if, like, let's say I was forced to be in a job like a flight attendant or something, I mean, first of all, I wouldn't take a job like that. But if I had, kind of gone in that direction and then utilized drinking as a mechanism to kind of soften that overaccumulation of multiple energies, that's sort of that slippery slope where, again, that alcohol becomes the addiction. And because alcohol specifically is a depressant, it will lead anybody into sort of a darker, lower vibrational tendency towards their thoughts. And then, if that happens, then it's kind of this vicious cycle where, again, it sort of releases the pressure to have a drink. So that becomes the coping mechanism. And that's how essentially somebody becomes an alcoholic, because it is just that. It usually starts out as a coping mechanism to deal with something in our outer environment. Now, the other thing it can be, that it can stem from, is social, I guess, pleasure, right? So, of course, when we're younger, I know I had this experience when I was younger, going out and drinking was kind of fun. It was kind of different. It's something I hadn't experienced a lot, and there was a certain freeing element to it. I often found that I would act in ways I wouldn't normally act if I hadn't had, several drinks. But again, people can go into this kind of environment just due to curiosity. And again, in my younger days, this is where, a few of my partners ended up really going down kind of a bad pathway, because they had come from really great homes. They had great infrastructure in terms of parental guidance and their extended families, but they got into this kind of habit of going out, drinking, and socially doing drugs. And there was an element of the party, of the escape, of everything feeling super good and feeling free and somehow, more connected to others via this vehicle of drugs and alcohol. But really, that is the biggest illusion ever, because you really don't ever remember in any, great way, in terms of the memories that you form when you're drinking or doing drugs. So the connections that you make with people when you're doing those things, they're not real connections. And most people don't have very formative memories around those kind of interactions, not any, kind of lasting memories anyways. And so, again, it can be fun, and it can be a very quick way to sort of escape or to go into this virtual reality of everything being fast and exciting and that rock and roll lifestyle. But usually the people that you're interacting with in those environments don't really care about you. I mean, they're in it for their quick fix or their cheap thrill as well, and they're not actually investing in you as a person in a party mode. It just doesn't, it doesn't happen. I mean, unless you're maybe traveling with a really good girlfriend or something like that, and there's lots of memories in between. But even so, there's enough negative things that often happen from that party lifestyle that I feel like I've had lots of experience watching people, go down this pathway, and it never leads to good things. So, those are sort of the two top reasons that I feel people kind of jump into this track of drugs and alcohol. Okay, so first of all would just be, boredom, wanting to have something that feels very visceral and exciting, and the other can be anxiety or social, awkwardness. So they don't know how to deal with other people, and so getting into another zone via drugs and alcohol can make the individual feel, more beautiful, more powerful, more interesting, and more free. And the other reason I believe that a lot of people get into any kind of addiction, drugs, alcohol, gambling, shopping, overspending, sexual addictions, anything like that, is because of loneliness or lack of connection. So when we're not feeling a lot of really deep connections in our lives, and if we're feeling this sort of pervasive loneliness, human beings are social creatures. So we have in our very nature that desire to connect with others. And there's two types of styles of this, okay? So, and it's on a spectrum, so they're not completely, totally, just two different types of people. But again, in terms of the introvert and the extrovert. So the introvert, which is the type of person I am, so I understand it, quite well. I gain energy, or I gain human connection from one-on-one, very deep, insightful exchanges of energy with people. And then I need to go back into my little cocoon, and I need to unwind and really process those relationships or those interactions. And I like to spend a lot of time alone. I really like to be doing activities. I like, the arts, that kind of things, but more solitary kind of interactions or one-on-one, okay? And then there is, or are, individuals that are extroverts. And an extrovert is somebody that they love the atmosphere of a lot of energies. So they actually pull energy, or they feel energized from being around a lot of people, big groups, busy restaurants, festivals, things like this, where there's a lot of people. And that's what really, gets them going and floats their boat. And I'm not saying that an extrovert has more superficial interactions, but it tends to be a little bit more transient, because again, they're juggling multiple energies, and they like that feeling of the multitudes, okay? And so for me, this also differs in the sense that I can get up on a stage and speak. So I can speak to a lot of people if those people are quiet, and I'm not having to bounce that energy back and forth and hold many conversations. So in that way, I can be extroverted. And when I was talking about the spectrum, so at any given time for any person, they're going to be kind of along this spectrum. And depending on, where your energy levels are. So when my energy levels are very low and I'm very tired and exhausted in a fatigue state, I become very introverted. And when my energy levels are very high, like if I'm on vacation and there's no stress in my life, I go along the spectrum, or move along the spectrum of a little bit more extroverted, okay? And everybody is like this. So everybody experiences that spectrum of beingness, okay? But in terms of how it relates to addictive personalities and addictions that we can form, when we're talking about human interaction and we're talking about loneliness and connection, when we aren't getting the opportunity for a lot of connection in our lives, and part of this can be actually quite a modern phenomenon, because again, when people are on their phones all the time, focused on social media, or in an office job where we're in a cubicle and we're not really interacting with others, plus the speed of information nowadays, everything is about progress and go, 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 and there's not as much time given to the individual or given to those deep conversations as actually might have gone on 50, 70, 100 years ago, when things were moving a little bit more slowly and people had more time. So this factor of loneliness can project a person, or can lead a person into a path of taking on addictive behaviors, because as we sort of fall into this place of loneliness, we want something to fill that void. So we're feeling lonely, we're feeling like there's maybe a lack of love or a lack of connection in our lives, and we don't really know how to fill that void. And again, it's a basic human need. So often what I've noticed with people with addictive personalities is that they will start doing whatever that escape mechanism is, or that addictive outlet, to help kind of dampen down the the issue or the feeling of loneliness or lack of interconnection. So, you know, I've seen this with people that like to gamble. Again, they want to go out of their house, they want to be out and about, but you know, maybe they don't have friends that can go with them. So going to a casino or going to a place like that, they can go alone and they can feel comfortable going alone, right? As it would be a little bit awkward maybe to go to a restaurant by yourself. This is often paired with drinking, right? If we are out and about and we're feeling a little awkward, if we have a drink, it's going to take that edge off and we're not going to feel so awkward. Things again like drug addictions. So different drugs do different things. If we're tending to be a little bit of a depressed personality, you know, we might want to really get out of those dark thoughts, and so we will take some sort of a drug that kind of puts us in, or you know, more so out of our mind and in kind of an, you know, maybe more of a opioid type drug that sort of just mellows everything out so the mind isn't spinning in sort of dark, depressing thoughts. There's, you know, also stimulant type drugs. So if you are somebody that, you know, doesn't normally know how to talk to people, maybe, you know, you have trouble communicating with people of the opposite sex, you don't have that natural charm or character, you know, you can take a stimulant, you know, some sort of a drug that's a stimulant, and you kind of come out of your box, and then you're able to chat people up and you feel, you know, less insecure. But again, all of these things alter the brain chemistry, and they're not healthy for the overall individual, and they have a lot of negative residual effects, okay? And so this would be the same with sexual addictions, people that are addicted to things like pornography, or, you know, this isn't so much a female thing, but it can be, you know, I know I've had a lot of male friends that have gone through this too, where there are sex workers and things like that, where they can get addicted to this lifestyle, which is a very low vibrational lifestyle. But again, it's the only way that they can feel that they can create this human connection, which is, again, it's false, and it does lead to a low self-esteem, and usually is, again, layered with other addictions that aren't healthy for the overall individual, and they really take you off track from your purpose, you know, from creating wonderful, beautiful things for the world. Anything that's an addiction is going to take you away from bringing forth your gifts. So there's things like shopping addiction, you know, pornography addiction, you know, where again, the brain gets some sort of a high from the activity, but again, that high is short-lived, and the high precipitates a low. And again, nothing really positive or sustainable was created. You know, there are other things in terms of addictions, things like eating addictions, anorexia, so being addicted to the controlling, you know, what's coming in terms of food intake, work, you know, being a workaholic. I'm a little bit on the spectrum of being a workaholic, okay? So sometimes when I'm in a tremendous amount of stress, the way I deal with it, or, you know, don't deal with it, is that I throw myself into work, and then I don't have to feel my emotions as much. And so even something like working can be an addiction, shopping can be an addiction. So over shopping or hoarding things, a lot of times, again, it's about that mechanism of control, wanting to control our environment and not wanting to feel the negative feelings, or essentially do the shadow work. Because again, anytime we are faced with obstacles in life and things that feel kind of negative, it's difficult for us as human beings to face it head on and say, you know, I'm gonna really look at this and I'm gonna peel it apart and I'm gonna feel it. So an example of this, I recently lost, you know, several people that were really important to me, and a dog that had been with me kind of my whole life, who was sort of my soul animal. And I was having quite a difficult time balancing work and then the flood of emotions that was, you know, coming out of nowhere. And I wasn't maybe dealing with it properly, or I wasn't allowing myself to feel my way through all of those emotions. And so essentially, again, I wasn't doing my own shadow work. I wasn't dealing with the things that were right in front of my face, of sort of negative behaviors, which would be working way too much, throwing myself into work, And this created an imbalance in terms of my own mental health. You know, the more I was feeling overwhelmed and in this cycle of grief and really in a tailspin, the more I pushed myself to work, when really what my body probably needed was a lot of rest, maybe some vacation time, and time to actually feel the grief and cry and mourn and, you know, take that time for myself. So again, when we're looking at these addictions, it's important to know what causes them, or what is the root cause of them. And I'm going to layer this video or make a secondary video about what are some of the things that you can do to get away or to get out of those addictive habits, and ways to kind of proactively put yourself in a positive place. But first of all, I wanted to identify what I've experienced and I've seen with people in my life in terms of addictive behaviors, and really look at the why behind how addictions are created, and, you know, why we'd even gravitate towards behaviors that really don't serve us and put us into a kind of a negative vortex. So again, I'm going to kind of stop this video where it's at, and watch for the next video where I talk a little bit about how to maneuver out of that addictive mindset. And again, it's a slow and steady process, but it's, you know, first of all, it's recognizing what are your triggers and what are the things that, you know, you might have to kind of buffer around yourself in terms of creating more positive behaviors, identifying the cause. And once you know the cause, and once you start to understand yourself a little bit better, you can put things into your daily routine and into your habits and patterns that will prevent against you having something like an addiction pull you into an arena or a way of life that you're not proud of and you're not happy of, and that kind of derails everything in terms of your progress and manifesting the life that you've always wanted to create. Hey guys, Barb with Inspire Me 360 here, and in this video I want to discuss a little bit about self-discovery and the shadow self. So doing your own deep dive and working on the things that you have to fix, the things that trigger you. So oftentimes when we are experiencing the world, looking out into the world and feeling somewhat victimized, okay, it's very, very easy to fall into this negative vortex of the mind, or this negative, you know, sort of spinning type of thinking. And I'm qualified to talk about this because I've had it happen to myself. I've experienced it, and it definitely would be for me a type of mental dialogue that was prevalent definitely in my younger years, but I see its reflection in a lot of individuals, and I also know how difficult it was for me to work through these pervasive negative thought patterns that I had. And so I want to break them down for you, okay? So oftentimes when we are dealing with any particular heavy situation in life, okay, we can start to get into a mindset that is spiraling towards low vibrational thoughts. And the way that the mind works is that when you start to kind of ping to negativity, the mind starts to reach out into its database essentially and back up sort of the predominant thought flow that's happening. So let's say again, you've lost your job and you know, you're feeling kind of frustrated, maybe you've gone through a breakup, okay? And you start, or the mind starts adding up all of the reasons why your life isn't good, you're unworthy, nobody likes you, nobody cares about you, the world is against you. And again, when we get into this frame of mind and this type of thinking, it's very easy to start adding up all of the reasons why, again, you are not worthy of love, you're not worthy of joy, and that essentially the external world is a system set up against you. And it doesn't matter what circumstance you come from, it doesn't matter how much abundance you truly have, how much actual love is around you. If the brain is going into this negative vortex of thinking, there's almost nothing that can stop it other than, again, your own attention to detail. So again, you have to kind of pull yourself out of this negative mindset and start realizing why you might be doing this, okay? For myself, in my younger days, I was doing it because I wasn't ready to do my own work, okay? It was easier for me to play the victim and to pile up all the reasons why I had been dealt a bad hand and why I really, was not going to make it, and I wasn't going to be able to achieve the things I wanted, because I had this long list of negative thought patterns piled up in my system. My system would play over this type of thought analysis very daily, okay? And the other thing that started to happen in terms of my own thinking is that I became very comfortable with this low vibrational state. So I very much understood kind of mucking around in this lower vibrational thought world, and you can romanticize it. So we see this play out in all of the Shakespearean dramas, or even when we watch movies and TV shows, there is a certain almost therapeutic element of watching a tragedy, and we get to express an extreme amount of emotion when we get caught up in the tragic scenario. So on some level, with these low vibrational thought forms, we are feeling, okay? It helps us to feel connected when we're feeling anything. And so sometimes the only way that we're able to connect with the world is to go into this very low vibrational victim mentality that, again, is quite a story or a tragic dialogue. And I don't want to discount this, okay? I don't want to say in the human journey or the journey of seeking and self-evolution that there isn't a purpose for this, because again, it's kind of the descent. It's the aspect of the mind going into this descended lower state to understand a higher state, okay? And so I'm actually going to quote Carl Jung here, and he says, no tree, it is said, can grow to heaven unless its roots reach down to hell. And so essentially what that statement is alluding to is the fact that there is purpose in the descent. There is a real element of learning when we go to these lower states of consciousness. We really understand the breadth of emotion and the depth of emotion. And from tragedy, we actually can achieve a higher level of joy and bliss and magnificence. And the reason why that is because we understand its opposite. If you've ever experienced something that's really incredibly difficult in your life, so when we lose a loved one, or a certain era ends, whether it's a marriage or the ending of a job, or the anything that feels like it's ripping us apart at our core, what happens is it's essentially these lower vibrational states are breaking us open. So they're opening up. A lot of times what it's doing is opening up our heart center and then our third eye, in the sense that we have to start seeking. Because when we talk about the state of rock bottom, so when any of us actually hit our rock bottom, and there's multiple ways where we can do this. Again, sometimes it is the passing of a loved one, it's the loss of friend groups, it's addiction, abuse, violence. There's a multitude of ways that these lower vibrational states can play out in terms of the landscape of our lives. But what is so important is that when we are hitting one of these obstacles, or if we are in this lower state of consciousness, that we start to utilize our higher self, so this higher plane of thinking, and we start to evaluate things. So really, when you are at a rock bottom state, it's also a point where you're going to put yourself under a microscope and you're going to do what I call shadow work. And that essentially means that you're going to have to start dissecting the pieces and parts of yourself that do not serve you. Because a lot of times it is our programming, our societal programming that has been instituted by our parents, okay? And not to say that our parents or grandparents or family or society is completely broken, but there are things that as we go through time, we want to level up. We want to come to a higher state of expression. And the reason why we want to level up or elevate ourselves is because, again, there is a beauty in feeling joy, in feeling bliss, in having life unfold in a magical, wonderful, stable, whole way. And we don't have to continually defer to this tragedy or some violent escapade. It doesn't have to be that way. We've done this for millennia as human beings. You know, we've lived out these crazy stories. Like, our human story is just absolutely crazy. If you look at the wars, the pain, the destruction. I was watching a documentary the other day about the witch trials. Just blows my mind what human beings have done to one another, and they don't think that it's absolute insanity. And again, whether it is this group of people fighting that group of people, or, you know, having some sort of a nemesis that we have to attack against, okay? You know, whether in the Crusades it was women who were the witches, or, you know, we can attack all sorts of different races and people for their sexual orientation. There's a myriad of ways that the human consciousness can find for some reason a valiant way to attack each other. You know, there's wars in the name of God. There's, you know, abuse in the name of righteousness that's written on a page. I mean, I'm not discounting that some behavior might be lower vibrational or distorted, or what I would call unconscious behavior. You know, even if we're talking about the way that human beings express in terms of their sexuality, okay? If there's a partnership and it's not done through the mechanism of divine love, what is divine love? You know, it's innocent, it's kind, it's coming from a place of devotion, okay? If you're entering into any other union and joining your body with another individual, and it's not under the highest vibrational expression, well, yes, it's going to be somewhat more, I don't want to, low vibrational, okay? It's going to be more primal. And is that good or bad? It's learning, right? And again, we are told not to judge others. And I think that this is something that really should be a fundamental principle, because when we start to, with a very limited vantage point, cast judgment on others without knowing their entire story and the story of all of the others involved, we start moving towards a very slippery slope. And judgment begets some sort of semblance of a reason for attack. But again, anytime that attack happens, it's based on an incomplete story. And then you try to wrap it in a package of righteousness. It's just not, okay? And this is, again, when we look, the journey has to be an individual one, okay?
we have to look at who and what we are, and we can't do it for others. Here's the other thing, okay? When you start looking at another human being and saying, this is what's wrong with you, this is what you're doing incorrectly, you know, I see this, you did that. Again, it's going to happen. I'm not saying that this kind of dialogue doesn't happen, but the journey is an individual one, and you start to grow when you actually take that projection and mirror it back, because the only individual on the entire planet that knows your entire journey and has been there every step of the way from the start to the finish of you is you. And so the only individual who accurately understands how to evaluate your progress is you. And so you have to start looking at the self in a very honest way. You have to take responsibility when you have done wrong. You have to take responsibility when you have done right. You have to look at the shadows that are within yourself and have the courage to say, I can do this better. What is the highest way I could have seen this situation? And also, again, give a time for rest. You cannot always be hammering down on yourself either. There is a time when you have to just let it all go. Balance. So the key principle here with all growth is an intelligent balance that we see, that lens, that intelligent balance is the lens that we start to observe ourselves and the world at large with. And it also comes with a high level of what I'm going to call temperance. And so I'm going to explain that a little bit more. What I mean by temperance is a patience with yourself and a patience with others. Slow and steady wins the race, okay? When we rush in with this attack mentality, no matter what circumstance we're looking at, whether it's a spousal situation, where it's, you know, a little insignificant fight, whether it's issues with grandparents, issues with parents, issues in the workplace, greater issues in terms of political issues, you know, group mentalities, okay? When we have one group upset at another group, or racial tensions between countries, okay? When we rush in and we make decisions, first of all, from a position of ego or anger or, you know, distortion, so not really understanding all of the pieces, we make bad decisions. And those decisions have consequences and they hurt people. So the ripple effect of these kind of decisions means mass chaos, violence, attack, distortion. And again, the way that we create a more beautiful world is with working with ourselves first, okay? And I truly believe that we need to adjust our educational systems. We need to have these kind of teachings for self-regulation and balance and mental stability put right into the curriculum for children from a young age. You know, perhaps they come from a home where these things are not taught. And to me, that would be the simplest thing to help achieve an equilibrium and a peace here on planet Earth, is take these 12 years that children are in schools. I mean, I own schools, so I know a lot about curriculum. I've created over 80 programs. I know about what it means to create curriculum. And I think it would be very, very easy from a global standpoint to create curriculum based on peace, love, kindness, mental stability, meditation, dealing with things like anxiety, depression, embedding these fundamental skills into the human consciousness and into our human family. But again, I'm not in that level of government. I'm not a regulator. I can only give an opinion. Okay, but I do know that anytime that we have chaos out manifesting in our world, we have to, as a responsible person, if we want to fix anything, we have to look at the self. And the minute that we start to fix some of the distortions that are out there in the quantum field, things start to adjust. And yes, if we start to adjust on that micro level diligently, daily, it starts to reverberate out to the macro. It starts, just like there can be mass psychosis, which is what I feel war is, when a society gets to a tipping point where it's complete distortion, a sort of mass psychosis happens throughout the population, and we have wars, and people do things that are unspeakable, unthinkable, and then you stand back from something like the Holocaust and you go, what on earth happened here? How did we get so far away from our core and our center? But the truth of the matter is that, again, it's when we step away from that self-reflection and the mechanism of adherence to the internal journey, okay? And that's what spirituality is. I don't care what book you read. Spirituality is that internal journey of seeking for a higher expression of consciousness. And consciousness directed through the three-dimensional avatar body. This body that we have is temporal, okay? We get it. We don't know how long we get it for. It has its senses, its five senses. We can experience the world, but essentially for consciousness to stream through this organic body, it is an avatar body. We are learning through it, okay? And so we utilize our physical reality to learn. And this is what, again, is so crucial to what we're seeing play out in terms of Earth right now. Also, okay, so this mass consciousness, a lot of what we see happening globally is extremely superficial, extremely. So everybody is worried about the cars, the way they look, everything that is outside of the self. And I'm not saying by any means that there aren't individuals that are seekers and spirituality and everything else, but it's not commonplace like it was, 100 years ago or 200 years ago when religion was so much part of daily life. And that can kind of circle back to religion itself, the institution itself, what within any church has been distorted, because there are distortions. When we have, issues with sexual abuse, with financial abuses, with power abuses, it doesn't matter what the institution is. If those things are happening in schools, in churches, in government, whatever it may be, it is a distortion of the original reason why that institution was created. Because whether it is a country, whether it is, like I said, a government system, a company, a religion, whatever that institution is, usually they're founded on decency and good principles in the beginning. And then as things infiltrate them, which are, again, the common distortions of humanity, vanity, greed, violence, all the different things, power, that hunger for power, whatever it is, these are dominant human traits that are pervasively unraveling things continually here on planet Earth. And so what do? Do we give up? Is it hopeless? Do we just say, oh my goodness, whatever, let's just smoke a joint or drink ourselves into a stupor and pretend that we don't want to enter into this questioning? I would say not. I think that, again, circle it back to the individual. What can you do as the individual? I've always tried to look at life through this vantage point. Be kinder, be more helpful, do your best, learn more, seek more. Really put the magnifying glass on your own actions, your own manipulations, your own distortions. How are you affecting the collective? What did you do today? Neville Goddard is, really, really worth studying. I love his work. But there's also this thing that he talks about revision therapy, or revising your day. And that's essentially where you go back, and it's a very internal journey, but you look at the day and how you lived it, and you see where you could have done it better. And you go through and you play it through the cinematic, expression of the mind, that part when you kind of go into that daydreaming state, and you replay and you say, I should have fixed this, and I should have fixed that, and I could have done this better. And then hopefully through this technique, when you are presented with a similar situation on the next day, you're going to pay attention, you're going to be changing something about your consciousness, and you're going to be working with the shadow self. So again, the purpose of why I'm making these videos is, of course, the more individuals, or the greater the number of individuals that start to do this work, the more beautiful we're going to find life is here, the more pleasant our experiences will be with our brothers and sisters here on planet Earth, and the more we will feel joy, and we will elevate our vibration. Because again, it's all, everything is energy, everything is vibration. So we are here to pay attention to who and what we are, and how we are out manifesting our internal worlds, and we're here to grow and become a better version of ourselves. So again, wishing you all a very, very wonderful day, productive day, and hopefully you found some of this insight helpful.